This is part 3 and the final episode of Tin Shack. Today I'm installing the garage doors. I decided to make these symmetrical as opposed to asymmetrical. I mentioned in the early video that I wanted to make one smaller entry door. The doors are just over 4 feet each, so it didn't make sense because I'm going to need that 4.5 feet to get my lawn tractors in and out with the mower decks attached. Anyway, the other thing that I discovered was in order to match the ribbing on the siding, I had to make them symmetrical because it would have become way too much work to cut this in a way that allowed those ribs to match. It made more sense to make them symmetrical because I could come closer to matching that rib from the siding down to the door. It's a small aesthetic thing, but something that in my brain I had to do. All right, I ended up deciding to use stressed skin, like in an airplane, for instance. So I wanted this door to be light and flexible, but not be flimsy. The frame on the door is a light frame. I'll show you that here in a minute. And I used the siding itself as a skin or as a support for the door itself. So by using a series of screws, like rivets on an airplane, I was able to attach that siding in a way that it becomes part of the structure of the door itself. It actually worked pretty well, and the doors are really light. So let's go ahead and get this thing installed. Funny how that works. My helper had to go to work today, so I'm trying to do this all by myself. The door's light enough, but getting this thing aligned is a real pain in the ass. Right now, there's no stop for the door to close against. So when you close the door, it can swing right past center and then go right into the inside of the building. So I have to build a stop. So I built a simple stop out of angle iron. And I'm going to screw that up into the header. And interestingly, the stop is also going to become the latch mechanism, or part of the latch mechanism, to secure the door to keep it from opening. And I'll show you that here in a minute. So when I was a kid, most of the houses in my neighborhood were built in the early 1900s, 1920, 1930, somewhere in that era. And any house that had a garage, most of those garages were small, tiny little one-car garages. And the majority of those garages had swinging doors just like this. And one of the things that I remember and sort of fascinated me growing up was that they were all kept closed by these little spring latches. And funny that I figured that wouldn't it be kind of cool to replicate that here. So I go to Home Depot looking for this kind of a latch. And Home Depot's a big store with stuff everywhere, with aisles everywhere, and sometimes it's just damn hard to know where anything is located. So I asked one of the aisle clerks, do you have a latch like this? And I described this latch from my childhood. And he was a younger guy, and he kind of looks at me weird and says, I've never heard of such a thing. He goes and he asks another aisle clerk, who was a little bit older, and the other aisle clerk had an idea what I was looking for, but didn't think that Home Depot had this beast. So we start going back and forth up the aisles, and we go over to a section that was totally unrelated to anything like this, and there are these latches. And I'm thinking, damn, they still make them. So I bought my pull latch, and the nice thing about it is it can go up on the top, and I can use the beveled latch to latch behind that angle iron that I just put in. Now it has a chain, and the neat thing about the chain is there's a ring at the bottom, so you don't have to be as tall as the door. You just need to have this chain and use the chain to pull the latch back. I'm sure I'm not the only one in the world that's familiar with these, but I just thought this was just cool to be able to find this and replicate those garages a little bit from my childhood. So let's go put this on. So my plan from the beginning was to have this right-hand door closed and locked solid, and then to use just the left-hand door to open and close to go in and out of the building for the lawnmowers and the rakes and all of the other kind of things. Now I've already shown you what I used for latching the top, that spring-loaded latch. For the bottom, I'm going to use this solid rod. It's a gate latch. So I picked this up at Lowe's, and it goes down through two rings, and then from there I'm going to drill a hole down inside the bottom plate for this to recess into, and then when I want to release it, I just lift it up and then it hangs off that top ring, and I'll show you how that goes in here. The rod is a 500 thousandths or half-inch rod, And if I drill a 500 or a half-inch hole, then it's going to be snug and tight in there. And then of course I'm drilling into wood. It's pressure treated, and because it's going to get wet and then dry, it's going to shrink and swell. So I've chosen to use this 600 drill. It actually measures 625, and that'll leave me enough wiggle room that I can get this rod in and out of the hole that it's going to recess into. So as that piece of wood swells, contracts, shrinks, expands, I'm going to be assured by using the larger drill that the rod is always going to fit in, and I'm going to be able to pull it out at any time that I need to get access to it. So let's go do that. Now I've marked the location for the hole. I'm going to start out with this smaller drill, this pilot drill, and then I'm going to follow up with the larger drill. So what I did was I took the smaller drill and I drilled all the way through the 2x6, and then took the larger drill and drilled roughly 3/4 of the way through. The reason I did that is I wanted this to bottom out and not get down into the dirt below it. But by drilling the smaller drill all the way through, if any water gets in this hole during a rainstorm, which is not really likely, but at least it's there if I need to, the water will drain out of that hole and then not surround the pin and then eventually rust it out. So in its full down position, it's loose, it's rattling. I really don't care because the door's not going to come out. And then when I need to open the door, I just pick it up. There's a slot in the ring. It just keeps it clear, and then I can move the door freely from there. I like it. So when no one was looking, I installed the last vertical panel, steel panel, on that right-hand door. And now I have to install the panel, the last panel on the other door. But before I do that, I want to show you the design and construction of the doors. I mentioned earlier that they were stressed skin, so that the skin or the metal siding panels were structural in themselves. And I want to show you how I designed or constructed the framework on the doors. And pretty simple, but pretty effective, and I think pretty solid. Let me show you how I did it. Now the framework itself is just 1 by 5, and then obviously I put one cross member halfway down from top to bottom. But what I did was, on all 4 corners, I cut half laps so that I overlapped each of those corners, which allowed me to glue and then screw that. And then the corners themselves became rigid. So because of the glue, because of the screws, and then because each of those corners is resting up against itself, it helps prevent those corners from racking. I was also concerned that I was just relying on that one glue joint. So I made some gussets on all the joints, and then glued and screwed those gussets in as well. And again, that adds an additional amount of surface for the glue and for the screws, preventing that hopefully from ever separating. And then from there I put in a series of screws that were separated 6 to 10 inches. And the idea was those screws would then secure those steel panels to the framework. And then between all of the half laps, the gussets, and the panels themselves, the door become very not rigid, but very stable, if you will. Now, I didn't want the doors to be completely rigid. I wanted some flexibility so that I can manipulate the doors to get the latches in place. The building's going to move. I know it's going to move. I just wanted to make sure that the doors were flexible enough that I could always move or unlatch the latches and then open the door no matter what the season or what the weather conditions are. And I think we've accomplished that. I did put in a wire brace from the top corner to the outer lower corner, so that should the door begin to sag, I don't think it will. That'll give the door some extra security. And the cable is on a turnbuckle, so should the door begin to sag, I don't think it will. I can tighten up the turnbuckle and bring some tension back into that door. Right now, those cables are loose. They're just not under any tension at all, which tells me that the door itself is doing what it's supposed to do. All right, so the last thing that I need to do is install that last panel and then the final latches on that left-hand door. So let's go get that done. I explained earlier that I installed that last panel on that right-hand door when no one was looking. So I did a bunch of experimenting trying to figure out what was the best way to cut this. I tried some shears, and the shears were just really hard and really difficult. Ultimately, what I ended up using was my Dremel tool, and I bought a series of these little Dremel tool cutoff wheels, and they are slick. They work really well. It took me 2 cutoff wheels to get through the entire length of that other panel, and I don't anticipate this one being any different. It just works really well. I was really surprised. I was hoping I wouldn't have to use my larger cutoff wheel, because the bigger the tool, the harder it is to control, and this one was like using a pencil, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Now, what I wanted to do was cut the panel wide enough so that it overlapped the gap between the panel and the white molding, and I was able to accomplish that. But while doing that, the problem was I had to recess or cut around or to relieve the area where the hinges are, so that it actually fit in beyond the hinge. And at the end, it looked fine. Nobody's going to see it, or nobody's going to know it. I mean, this is a shed, for God's sakes. What was really nice about this is that when I measured the distance, so what I needed to do was overlap this panel over the original panel. So I needed to measure this. So I went from the inside of the white trim to roughly the inside of this line, and it came out to be 21¼ inches. Now, what makes that particularly useful is that when I measure the panel from that outer edge, the 21¼ inches gets it right to that line on one of those minor ribs. So I get to follow that rib and with my cutoff wheel, and it's nearly perfect when it's done. Before I get started, I'm going to put in my earplugs and safety glasses, or my readers actually, because I can't see crap without them. These little death wheels, it doesn't matter how big or how small they are. When they go away, they just go away. I've already had one of these split on me on another project I was working on. So, yeah, you just don't want these things to go on you. And this little Dremel is really loud. So, earplugs and safety glasses. Now, even though I followed that line, and the little Dremel cutoff wheel does a really nice job at creating a pretty straight line because I followed that cutoff line. It's still a little bit ragged, so I have this large bastard file. It's pretty aggressive. The teeth are really pretty aggressive. Anyway, so the last thing that I'm going to do is try to straighten that line out as much as I can, taking out as many of the highs and the lows and as even as I can. So the next thing I have to do before I install it is to cut away or recess around the hinges. So I want this to be as straight as I can before I get to that point. Last screw. The building is done. The doors are done. So what I ended up doing was that right hand door, as you're looking at it, I made that door solid so that it bolts at both the top and at the bottom, whereas the left door, it has a single latch, and that way I can use only that left door to go in and out. So as we talked about earlier, on the bottom I have the pin latch going down into the sill, and then the same pull latch or spring latch that you just saw on the front of this one. That way, when I need the wider opening for my boat or one of my cars, I can do that. But to simply go in and out for rakes and shovels and other tools, or my lawnmowers, I can just open that left-hand door and not have to open the entire thing. This has been a fun project. I've been wanting a building like this for a really long time, so having this done is really exciting for me. Now, if you've made it this far through the video, I really want to thank you. Really want to tell you how much I appreciate that. My subscribers are starting to take off. My views are starting to take off. The YouTube algorithm is finally starting to be nice to me. So all of the comments, all of the likes, all of the subscribes have been really helpful. Now, for my subscribers, if you've made it through this far, stick around because I want to tell you a little bit about the future of the channel. It's pretty clear that most of my subscribers came to the channel because of my firearm or my Jeep content. There's a few scattering of folks who've subscribed because of the Grand Prix, my tractor, the Yamaha motorcycle. But by and large, most of you have come over because of the firearms and the Jeeps. With the firearms content, I've got 3 projects I'm working on that I want to share with you over the next several weeks or several months. The first is I want to go back to working on that Model 73 restoration. Still, that's in my plan. I want to continue doing the gun shorts. I've got a really nice old Winchester that I want to show you, talk about that. Also, I'm going to build a custom. Recently, I bought this Winchester Model 1917 that sometime in the last 50 or 60 years, somebody converted that military rifle into a custom. There's no way the gun can go back to its original state, so I want to take that rifle and do my own customization to it, making a new stock, fixing up the barrel and the action, doing a reblue, and really a whole bunch of other things. And while I'm doing that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of custom gun work as it was done in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. With winter and winter snows coming on, not so much sure how much Jeep stuff I'm going to be able to do for you, but I got a couple things I want to do on the CJ2. And I've also got all those parts that have been scattered in my shop now for months that are just making a mess. And I'd really like to get all those separated, cataloged, and I want to show you that as well. So more Jeep stuff coming, more firearm related stuff coming. So I hope you continue to stick around, continue to watch. I'll see you in the next one.
I won't slow down. Yeah, I am on my way up. I won't slow down.